Today, we're going to talk about the invisible force that shapes your entire work life, from who you answer to how you get things done. We're talking about organizational design.
Have you ever had a job where everything just clicked? The company felt agile, creative, you could get things done? Or maybe you've been on the other side of that coin where getting a simple approval felt like an impossible task. Well, the reason those places feel so incredibly different, it almost always boils down to their organizational design.
Okay, so let's jump right in by thinking about this whole thing as your company's hidden blueprint. It's the secret architecture that holds everything together.
So what is it, really? Well, organizational design is the process where leaders and managers actively create or tweak a company's structure. It's all about intentionally arranging people and jobs to hit specific goals. This stuff doesn't just happen by accident. It's a series of very deliberate choices.
So, just like an architect's blueprint maps out a building's flow and function before anyone even lays a single brick, organizational design determines how information travels, how decisions get made, and ultimately, how work actually gets done. To really get a handle on this blueprint, we need to look at its 6 fundamental building blocks. These are the core pieces that managers mix and match to build any organization, and we're about to walk through every single one.
Let's start at the very beginning, at the ground level. How do you even design individual jobs? And then, how do you group them together into teams that actually work?
Our first building block is work specialization. You've probably heard this called the division of labor. It's simply the idea of taking a huge, complicated task, like, say, building a car, and breaking it down into smaller, more focused jobs for different people to do.
And the power of this is just massive. Look at Adam Smith's famous pin factory example. He saw that if 10 people each did just one tiny part of making a pin, together they could crank out 48,000 pins a day. But if they each tried to do the whole process alone, they'd be lucky to make 200. That's the power of specialization right there.
But, there's always a catch. While specialization is incredibly efficient, it can also lead to serious boredom and burnout when a job becomes nothing but the same tiny, repetitive task over and over again. So the real trick is finding that sweet spot.
Okay, so you've broken down the work into all these specialized roles. What's the next logical step? Well, you have to figure out how to group those jobs back together into teams and departments that make sense. This is what we call departmentalization. And there are basically 5 common ways to do it. You can group people by their function, like putting all the marketing folks together. Or you could group them by product, by customer type, by the part of the world they cover, or even by the process they work on. Each approach has its own pros and cons.
All right, let's move up to the next layer of our blueprint. We've got jobs and we've got teams. Now we've got to map out the power structure. Who's in charge of who?
And that brings us to the chain of command. It's that invisible line of authority that runs all the way from the CEO down to the person who just started yesterday. Its whole purpose is super simple but absolutely vital: to make it 100% clear who you report to and who reports to you.
Now, for the chain of command to actually work, 2 ideas are absolutely key. First, there's the unity of command, which just means you should only have one boss giving you orders, no confusion. Second is the scalar principle, which means that line of authority has to be clear and unbroken from the very top to the very bottom. Everybody needs to know where they stand.
A huge part of this structure relies on delegation. But let's be honest, it breaks down all the time. And what's fascinating is why. It really comes from both sides. Managers might be afraid to let go of control, and employees might be scared of failing or feel like there's no reward for taking on extra work.
This leads us right into our next concept, the span of control. This one answers a really critical question. How many people can one manager actually lead well? If the number's too big, people get ignored. If it's too small, you end up with way too many managers and things get slow.
So what's the magic number? Well, it varies. But the management thinker Ralph Davis suggested an executive span of somewhere between 3 and 9 people for managers in the middle and at the top. That smaller number allows for the kind of close collaboration you need for complex, high-level work.
All right, we're on the home stretch with our final 2 building blocks. These are about the big, strategic choices. How much control do you keep at the top, and how many rules do you really need?
This is the classic tug-of-war between centralization and decentralization. In a centralized company, all the big decisions are made by a handful of people at the top. In a decentralized company, that decision-making power is pushed down the ladder so employees closer to the action can make the call. Honestly, the trend these days is definitely toward more decentralization to stay fast and flexible.
And last but not least, we have formalization. The easiest way to think about this is as the company's official rule book. It's all about how standardized the jobs are. In a place with high formalization, like a fast food restaurant, there's a procedure for everything. But in a fast-moving tech startup, things are probably a lot looser.
And while rules are great for consistency, having too many can really backfire. It can kill flexibility, slow things down when the rules don't match reality, and frankly, just make people miserable and stressed out.
So we've gone through all 6 of these building blocks. We've seen how they all work. So what's the big idea we should walk away with?
After looking at all of these different levers you can pull, it all leads to one big question, right? What is the one single best way to design a company?
And the answer is, there isn't one. It's a trick question. These 6 elements aren't a rigid, one-size-fits-all blueprint. They're a toolkit. The best design is the one that's custom-built to help a specific company with its specific people achieve its specific goals. So I'll just leave you with this thought. The next time you're at work, take a look around. Now that you know what you're looking for, can you see the blueprint? Can you see how these 6 elements were put together to create the company you work for every day?